Hey everyone, welcome to this week's reading of Empire of Serpents with myself and PD Mac. We're doing chapters 7 and 8, so we will just jump right in. Chapter 7. Gwen, tell me how this is going to work, Gwen asked. She rubbed the back of her neck, trying to work out the soreness. We'll spread the word in the streets, Kaelin replied. Anyone you see is a potential ally. Won't that draw the attention of Taurian soldiers? Probably, but unless you have a better idea, I think it's worth the risk. Gwen knew Kaelin was right, but she still didn't like it. She also didn't like being forced to change their strategy at the last minute. With a city as large as Westman, there were bound to be problems they couldn't account for. They had arrived less than an hour ago and were waiting near a well for Vinya to meet them in her elven form. From the air, Gwen had seen that Westman was shaped like a compass, with the city divided into 4 smaller sections by large waterways that dispersed water from the nearby river into the city. There's only 3 of us, Gwen lamented. We could cover more ground if we had more bodies. And if a bard had 4 arms, it could play 2 instruments. What's your point? Focusing on the problem doesn't get us anywhere. Gwen looked at Kaelin and he held his hands up placatingly. I'm just saying, we should find the silver lining no matter how thin it is. I know, but it's difficult, Gwen replied. Nothing of value is ever easy, Kaelin said. You seem too young to have experienced many difficulties. Kaelin laughed. You haven't met my father. He forces difficulty on me constantly. I'm sorry. Don't be. Maybe once this is all over, I'll be considered a hero and choose my own path. What do you mean? Gwen asked. I don't want to be a mage. Were it up to me, I would live by the sword, carving out glory and fame with my skill. Gwen was surprised. Kaelin was more like her in that regard. When Eridor had first told her she was a mage, she didn't want to walk that path. Yet she had been forced upon it and walked it even now, unsure of what life would be like without magic. Lyra came into view at the end of the street and she joined them at the well. We should split up to cover more ground, she said. I don't think we should, Gwen replied. What if one of us gets into trouble? The others wouldn't know. Normally, I would agree with Lyra, Kaelin said, but in this instance, I must side with Gwen. We don't have enough people as it is. If one of us were to get caught by the guards, it would be impossible to free them. We should stick together. Lyra frowned, but she acquiesced. Very well. Gwen waited for one of them to decide where to start, but they were both staring at her. What are we waiting for, Your Majesty? Kaelin asked. Stop calling me that, Gwen huffed. It's just Gwen. She looked around at the various shops that lined the street, thinking, and then an idea came to her. We could find bards to help spread the message. With what money? Kaelin frowned. The money Eridor gave me. It should be plenty to convince those greedy minstrels to sing of our plight. And how will we eat? Do you want food or do you want to save our kingdom? I'd like both, and I don't want to be forced to choose. Too bad, Gwen said. They navigated the crisscrossing streets until they found a tavern that had music playing within. Gwen handed Kaelin a handful of coins. See what you can do, she said. He shrugged and entered the tavern. Lyra and Gwen waited outside. After a few moments of uncertainty, Kaelin returned with a smile. That was easy. The man probably would have done it for free. Gwen doubted that, but she was happy regardless. Start telling everyone we need their help. When we find places like this, she pointed at the tavern, or come across bards on the street, we give them some money and keep going. The 3 of them spread out across the street and began stopping passerby. Initially, Gwen found some resistance. People thought she was a beggar who wanted a handout, but when she started talking, they listened with rapt attention. Kaelin had been right. People were tired of Taurian. Gwen expected their task to take them most of the day, but as they spread through the city, so too did their words. By the time they crossed the bridge into the second section of the city, people were already aware of their message and were spreading it themselves. We told people who were interested to meet us outside the city, but we don't have anywhere to host them. We've no tents or bedrolls or anything, Kaelin said. I thought about that, Gwen replied. These people live here. They can sleep in their homes until we're ready to march. When will that be? Lyra asked. Hopefully at dawn's first light, but we can't leave until the prestiges from the great library arrive. They are the key to battling Taurians. What if they aren't here by then? Gwen didn't even want to consider that as an outcome, but it was possible. Then we go ahead without them and leave a message to continue to Isentol. Whether we have 5 people or 500 doesn't matter now. We just have to get there and get Torian's attention before he focuses his might on Connell and his army. 500 would get his attention more than 5, Kaelin said with a chuckle. Imagine 5 people showing up outside the castle gates demanding he abdicate the throne. I don't think he'd even notice. Gwen couldn't help but smile. The sight would indeed be laughable. A commotion nearby caught their attention, and Gwen spotted a contingent of soldiers harassing a young boy. "Vengeance is coming," the boy shouted as the guards tried to wrangle him under control. "It looks like they've heard their days are numbered," Kaelin said. Gwen had considered the fact that she or Kaelin could get arrested, but she hadn't considered that the soldiers might target innocent people. Before she could decide what to do, Kaelin rushed to join the fray. He lowered a shoulder and drove it into the back of one soldier, sending him crashing to the ground. Kaelin turned to the next one and grabbed onto his helmet, forcing the soldier's head down onto his knee. The armor clanged as if it had struck a shield, and the soldier cried out as Kaelin tossed him aside. Gwen blinked several times before breaking out of her reverie. She sprinted to the boy. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I am now," he said with a large smile. "Pummel him, sir. Show that pig what for." "You should get home," Gwen said. "It's too dangerous for you out here." The boy looked like he was going to argue, then nodded and ran off. Gwen turned around in time to see Kaelin take down another soldier. Within a matter of seconds, he had subdued 3 of them. The remaining 2 had drawn their swords, but they were keeping their distance and seemed hesitant to engage Kaelin. "Tell your fellows that if they harass anyone else, the wrath of Her Majesty Queen Gwen will find them," Kaelin shouted. A bell started ringing a few buildings down, and Gwen realized they were near a guard outpost. She cursed under her breath. "We need to hide somewhere," she said to Kaelin. Before she'd finished her sentence, she spotted soldiers bolting out of the building. Someone met with the soldiers and pointed in her direction. Gwen squinted to see who it was. Why would one of the citizens rat them out? As she stared, it almost looked like... "No," Gwen said. "It can't be." "What is it?" "More guards," she replied, "and a powerful enemy, a mage." "We can take him," Kaelin said with a tone of superiority. "It's a her, and I don't know about that. She's got more runes than most prostitutes' body counts." Kaelin gave her an odd look, and she shrugged in response. The soldiers started running toward them. "Here they come." Gwen turned to Lyra. "Hide." "I'm tired of hiding," Lyra replied. "I want blood." The tone of her voice sent a shiver along Gwen's spine. She nodded. The time for running was over. It was time to fight. Lyra issued a roar as she partially shifted into a dragon. Her body stretched and changed, but only until she looked like a massive lizard. She charged the 2 soldiers who'd been keeping their distance and whacked one with her tail. The other one she snapped up in her jaws, crunching the man's bones loudly. Gwen blanched and turned to face the approaching soldiers. She held up her right hand and inhaled a deep breath, then summoned the magic of her fire rune. "Tyne," she said, speaking the rune's name. A wave of flames erupted from her palm and shot forth, engulfing the nearing soldier. He screamed in terror and anguish, his armor melting under the intense heat. He was the first to die. Gwen spoke the rune again, killing another soldier. She watched as more of them came out of the outpost, and she watched them as they died, writhing in the wrath of her fire. "Watch this," Kaelin shouted. She kept her focus on the magic, but offered a glance in his direction. He was pointing to the sky where a group of birds wheeled overhead. He spoke a word, and the birds changed direction, diving down to attack the guards. "That's nothing," Gwen shouted back. She cut off the magic and switched hands. Tintreach. Lightning flashed from her fingertips and forked apart, striking 2 soldiers simultaneously. They died instantly, and the bolts ricocheted, killing 2 more soldiers. Despite their magical attacks, the soldiers kept coming at them. "Amateur," Kaelin laughed. He spun in a circle and held his right hand out, shouting another word. This time, an ethereal ball formed. He threw it at the center of a small group of soldiers. The ball grew as it sped through the air. It landed on the ground, quivered briefly, and then exploded, sending hundreds of spikes airborne. "That's impressive," Gwen said, "but not as impressive as this." She called on the magic of the might rune and waited until the soldier was right on top of her before she punched him in the chest plate and as she yelled, "Leidrich." The armor caved in under her enhanced blow, crushing the man's chest and sending him reeling. Gwen was just as surprised as Kaelin. They continued in the sordid game, pushing each other into more insane ways of taking out their enemies until the street was littered with dead soldiers and none remained. Lyra stalked around like a predator, her head swiveling as she looked for more enemies. The general citizenry had cleared the area already, and as Gwen surveyed their work, she started to feel ill. She had killed many people, and she had laughed doing it. Bile rose in her throat, and she forced it down, gathering her saliva and swallowing it to ease the burning of her tonsils. Their fight wasn't over, though. Bells were ringing all around the city. More guards would be coming, but Gwen wasn't thinking about that. She watched Emil slowly approach, their gazes fixed on one another. "I see you've learned some new tricks," Emil said, casting a glance at the bodies. "Why are you here?" Gwen asked, clenching her fists. Emil's betrayal burned in her veins like her fire rune, and Gwen wanted nothing more than to obliterate the woman from existence. I'm here to kill you, Emil replied casually. Torian tires of the rebellion, and he's about to stamp the life out of it. He can try, but his cruelty lacks our passion. We will defeat him. Enough talk, Emil spat, and then she swept her arm up, and a rush of air struck Gwen, pushing her back a few feet. Kaelin turned her magic against her, using his wind breath rune to turn the direction of the gale back at her. She dove out of the way, rolling aside and coming up quickly. Her body rippled, and suddenly there were 5 of her, each one identical to the others. Gwen couldn't tell which one was the real Emil. She spoke the name of the lightning rune, shattering one of the illusions into pieces like broken glass. The other 4 scattered and hurled different spells at Gwen and Kaelin, putting them on the defensive. A faint blue glow appeared around Kaelin, and Emil's attacks bounced off harmlessly. He threw another spiked ball and closed the distance between himself and Gwen, sharing his shield with her. The ball exploded and destroyed 2 of the 4 illusions, while also sending a wave of spikes into the surrounding buildings. Gwen was glad the area had been evacuated. The devastation the spikes caused would have killed many innocent people. Emil knelt and dug her fingers into the dirt between the cobblestones of the street. The ground shook around Gwen and Kaelin before a gaping hole opened up, threatening to swallow them. Gwen wrapped her arms around Kaelin and summoned the might rune, throwing them backward and away from the hole. I think you were right, Kaelin said as they got back on their feet. She's a worthy opponent. He paused. We might want to run. We can't. She'll find us. Emil won't stop until she's dead, or we are. Then we need to find a way to kill her, Kaelin said, stating the obvious. I'm open to ideas. When Kaelin didn't offer any, Gwen looked at him. He shrugged. I can shield us and we can try to get close to her. That's all I've got. Gwen considered each of her runes. The healing and life rune were obviously no good in this fight. That might work, Gwen finally said. If we can get close enough, I can use my dark rune. What does it do? It steals life, but I have to be touching her. So we have to get really close, Kaelin said. Too close, Gwen replied. There's no telling what other magic she's got. What if we had a diversion? Such as what? Kaelin tilted his head, and Gwen looked in the direction he was hinting at. Lyra was perched atop the roof of a building near Emil, her reptilian eyes watching the woman intently. She must know Lyra's there, Gwen said. She's been watching the whole time. Maybe, but a diversion doesn't have to be a surprise. It just has to draw her attention. Can you communicate with Lyra and tell her what we're doing? I don't know if it works with dragons, but I can try. He closed his eyes. Gwen watched Lyra, but if the dragon could feel Kaelin's mind, her demeanor didn't show it. She'll pounce on her, Kaelin said, and it was surprisingly easy to touch her mind, even more than with Corla. Gwen didn't care about that, but she smiled anyway. Lyra leapt off the building, and Emil immediately turned to face her. Hold on, Gwen shouted, and grabbed Kaelin's hand. She summoned the rune on her thighs, only a vague idea of what they did as she said, Luas. They sped forward so quickly that everything around them blurred. Gwen barely stopped in time before they passed Emil completely. Lyra landed beside them, her jaws snapping at Emil, but the woman easily sidestepped out of Lyra's path. Gwen reached out as her speed slowed and latched onto Emil's arm, jerking her and Kaelin forward roughly before coming to a stop. With vengeance within her reach, Gwen fell into the power of the dark rune. Drained Sal, Emil screamed in anger and pain as her life force was violently ripped away. Gwen felt the energy streaming into her own body, addictive and powerful. It revitalized her flagging strength, and she could feel Emil weakening. Despite the euphoria, Gwen knew the magic was unholy. It was magic so dark no one should ever have discovered it. Emil dropped to her knees, and her face looked like it had aged several years within just a few seconds. It's wrong, her subconscious told her. Yet it felt so good. Emil deserved to die. She'd poisoned many elves, and some of them had died. This was the fate she deserved, to suffer and die painfully. And yet, there was a fate that could be worse for the woman. An idea struck Gwen, and she focused on the stream of life energy flowing out of Emil. She followed the trail until she found what she was looking for. A glowing sphere of golden light hovered near Emil's spine. Gwen turned the power of the dark rune on it, and with a single thought, she snuffed the light out. Emil's Bunus died, and with it, her access to magic.
Chapter 8, Connell. For 2 days, Connell's army swarmed north, moving as quickly as possible, yet not so fast as to tire. He spent most of the time either with Lorcan or Story, discussing battle plans and listening to their counsel based upon years of experience. Of his special concern was remaining unnoticed for as long as possible. Scouts had been deployed well up to their front, and flanks provided for early warning. Likewise, Connell had the two mages pay attention to the skies for messenger birds. Corla wasn't especially happy to be relegated to bird watching and decided to check in with Caitlin, only to have to listen to his boastful exploits of getting to ride a dragon and some adventure in a pub where he threw a table at some Taurian soldiers. The way he told it, he was having the time of his life. And here she was, bored, playing second fiddle to some old woman and looking for birds. Connell frustrated her. Why couldn't he see that she was doing far more and she was far more valuable than merely bird watching or checking to see what Gwen was doing? She was a mage, a powerful mage. And when the time came, she would show him. But it was more than that. Ever since he told her to call him Connell, she had reminded him that he was a lord and she was a mage. He became distant, almost brusque, especially when that woman showed up claiming to be a mage. As if reading her thoughts, Madeline sidled up next to her, spread her lips in a root-stained smile. Don't worry, dearie. Your secret's safe with me. What secret? Corla replied. That you're new in this mage business. Just started, have you? Corla glared at her. I was born to be a mage. Madeline barked a laugh and shook her head and dropped back so that Corla rode alone, stewing at the insult. Riding behind them, Connell saw the exchange, wondering why the old woman was picking on Corla. He was tempted to ride up beside her, but he didn't want to have to deal with her moods. Madeline dropped back far enough to ride alongside Connell. Relax, young lord, she grinned. I know what I'm doing. Up till now, all her training's been schooling. Never had to kill a man. Don't know what it's like to take a man's life and don't know what it's like to lose her family. She's unsure of herself, just making sure when the time comes, she'll be ready. By picking on her, he looked at Corla, whose sour expression hadn't changed. It's what she needs, she said with a shrug. You'll see. Unconvinced, Connell was about to question her teaching methods when he noticed a rider approaching. The man circled around Connell and reined in his horse to ride beside him. Forward scouts have made contact, my lord. Per your instructions, 2 scouts have ridden into the enemy's camp to report to the enemy commander. Good work, Connell complimented, his worry increasing. Everything depended on Halfgan believing they were Fearon's army. Go back to your position. Yes, my lord. Before the rider had spurred his mount forward, Connell turned to Volder. Tell a story, we're stopping. I want to hear what the enemy commander has to say before we get much closer. But he needs to be prepared in case we have to attack. As Voldar sped off, Connell issued the same instruction to another courier and sent him ahead to Lorcan. 10 minutes later, both Story and Lorcan came riding up. Once the scouts have returned, we'll know how to position, Connell said. It's a dangerous game we play, my lord, Lorcan said. I pray my scouts not betrayed. I know, Connell fretted, and for the next hour nervously waited for the 2 scouts to return, occasionally looking up to the scattered billowy clouds in the afternoon sky. Every now and then, he thought he saw a hawk and would shoot a glance at the 2 mages whose lack of interest told him not to worry. Story and Lorcan had returned to their armies to reposition security in anticipation. It was with great relief when Lorcan returned with the 2 scouts. What news? Connell asked, his eyes bright with excitement. It's a piece of cake, my lord, the one scout said. He was a wiry man with russet hair and beard. We rode in like we were glad to finally be there. They took us to the commander straight away. She's a tall one, strong and demanding. She started to interrogate us a bit, asking where the rest of us were. But we acted the part, the other scout added. She was the same height as the man, sinewy with auburn hair. I greeted her and said that Commander Fearon sends his respects and asked where she wanted him to position his forces. That seemed to flatter her. My impression was that she wasn't too keen on him being here. They've got the city under siege, the man explained, but they're spread thin. They concentrated most of the forces at the main gates. They were halfway finished building a battlegram, the woman said, when we left and positioning catapults. Could you tell the size of her forces? Connell asked. The 2 scouts exchanged a look before the woman spoke. From what we could tell, my lord, they were less than half what we got. Yes, Connell exclaimed. Look who I found wandering around, Story called out, riding up. Drustin and a woman of aristocratic bearing riding beside him. Drewston, Connell declared, where have you been? You missed all the excitement. Good to see you too, my lord, he replied with a smile. Since when have you been so formal? Connell gently chided. Drewston shrugged. You are who you are, my lord. This is Mynheer, a half-druid like me. I've been absent due to discovering her whereabouts. When I explained who you are and what you were doing, she insisted on helping. Connell immediately understood, greatly pleased. You're most welcome, Mynheer. Thank you, my lord, she respectfully answered. Mynheer was a comely woman with long raven black hair that cascaded down her shoulders and contrasted sharply with her milk-white skin. She wore the raiment of a huntress, brown leather breeches tucked into darker brown boots, a forest green V-neck short-sleeved top of finely woven cotton, and a thin circlet holding her hair back. 2 crossbows dangled from the pommel of her saddle. So what's your plan? Drewston asked. Mynheer, Madeline exclaimed, riding up. By the gods, it's wonderful to see you again. And you too, Madeline, she replied with a warm smile. Turning to Connell, she added, you are indeed fortunate to have a mage with her powers with you. We have another, Connell quickly pointed out as Corla eased her mount into the mix. So I see, Mynheer noncommittally answered, causing Corla to grimace. What is your plan? Drewston repeated. We infiltrate and attack them from the inside, Connell confidently replied. Seeing the confused looks on the newcomers' faces, he explained. Their commander thinks we're forces of her compatriot from down in Blazington come here to help her attack Gorwick, which she presently has under siege. Lorcan and his army will move into the enemy camp and pretend to set up bivouac. Meanwhile, Story's forces will position themselves to attack from the opposite direction. Would you like our help? Mynheer asked. Absolutely, Connell said before seeing Drewston's tight lips. That is, if you'd like, I trust you to place yourselves where needed. Thank you, Drewston nodded, giving Mynheer a look of irritation. What about us? Madeline spoke up. The young'un and me. I'm not a young'un, Corliss snapped. We don't know if she has mages with her, Connell hastily said, so I'll need you both to be on the lookout for anything strange. You know how best to deal with that. Looking pointedly at Corley, he said, listen to her and do what she says. What? Corley stiffened, her nostril threatened. I'll not. Yes, you will, Connell growled. Either that or go back and find that brother of yours with Gwen. Dismissing her from his attention, he turned to the others. Time to get ready. While Story positioned the dwarves' army to the east of the city, Lorcan and his soldiers moved up the main road towards Gorwick. Connell and Lorcan placed themselves toward the rear of the army with a plan of getting as much of his army in position before the deception was discovered. Connell searched for Drewston and Mynheer, but no one knew where they were. Much to Connell's surprise and advantage, Halfgan was preoccupied with placing the catapults and berating those constructing the battering ram that she didn't want to be bothered with new arrivals, expecting Fearon to come to her. It was a battle of personalities, as she expected to be overall commander. Yet when Fearon failed to show up, she sent someone to look for him. Connell was in conversation with Lorcan when Halfgan's emissary arrived, haughty as his commander. The emissary, a plump staff officer who flaunted his position, rode up and flashed a condescending glance at Connell and Lorcan. Where's Fearon? The man arched his back and cast a slow, regal glance at their surrounding bivouac. He's not here, Connell indifferently replied. Well, where is he? The emissary tersely demanded. Scratching his head, Connell frowned at Lorcan. I'm confused. Was it my turn or yours to watch him today? Lorcan shook his head. You know, I'm not sure. Tell you what, I'll flip you for it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a coin. Heads, it's my turn. Tails, it's yours. 2 out of 3? Connell grinned. Okay, 2 out of 3 it is. Lorcan had no sooner flipped the coin in the air when the emissary barked, By the gods, what is wrong with you two? Do you know who I am? As Lorcan caught the coin and smacked in the back of his hand, Connell stared intently at the man, shook his head, and turned back to Lorcan. Well? Lorcan removed his hand aside. Heads. The advantage yours. He flipped the coin again. Did you hear what I said? The emissary snapped. Connell raised a hand at him to be quiet, though his attention was on the coin on the back of Lorcan's hand. Hold on. Tails, Lorcan triumphantly announced. Connell swiveled his head to grin at the emissary. One more tells the tale. Oh, the suspense is mounting. The crowd grows quiet. I don't believe this, the emissary snarled. I said, the crowd grows quiet, Connell chided. Lorcan flipped the coin once more and happily announced, Tails, it's your turn. Well, Connell sighed with disappointment. As usual, I've never won anything. Turning back to the emissary, he knit his brow at him. What were you saying? Do you know who I am? The man snarled. Nope. Connell turned to Lorcan and hooked a thumb at the man. Do you know him? Lorcan shrugged. Never seen him before in my life. What are your names? The emissary angrily commanded. You don't know who we are? Connell asked as though surprised. Of course not. I guess that makes us even. Listen, bub, tell her highness that if she wants to see General Fearon, she needs to come here. What? The emissary exploded. General Fearon? Who does he think he is? Where is he? I will not stand for this insubordination. He went to spur his horse forward when Connell grabbed the reins. I wouldn't do that if I were you, friend, Connell threatened. The emissary's eyes blazed, but movement out the corners of his eyes caused him to look to see a dozen or more soldiers with death in their eyes heading this way. Wheeling his horse around, he galloped away, yelling back over his shoulder, You'll pay for this. Lorcan chuckled. Well played, my lord. Well played yourself, Connell complimented. Now let's see if we get any reaction. It wasn't long before the emissary returned with a dozen soldiers who fanned out behind him. I demand to see Fearon. Connell looked at him, then the soldiers with him began snorting a laugh. Really? You come here with 12 soldiers to compel the general to go with you? Are you that stupid? Like I said before, tell her highness that she needs him. She needs to come here and take your kids with you. He craned his neck to look up at the early evening sky. Besides, it's almost dinner time. Tell her to come by after dinner. But Fearon has to come now. She commands him come now. She commands him? Connell's face hardened. Listen, Junior, you and I are stuck in the middle between two stubborn commanders. You do realize that this will go on all night until one of them sucks it up and goes to see the other. Tell you what, let's see if we can get them to meet in the middle between the two armies, sort of neutral ground. That way both their vanities can be salved, and maybe we can get on taking the city. Do you agree? Emissary pondered a moment before nodding. What you say makes sense. I'll be back. Connell watched him right away, the soldiers with him, relieved that they were not needed. Lorcan stepped closer to him and lowered his voice. Story should be in position by now. Good. I want to wait until it's almost dark before we attack. 10 minutes later, the emissary was back. What did she say? The man sighed in frustration. No change. She wants him to come to her. I figured as much, Connell kindly said. Tell you what, why not stay for a bit, have something to eat with us, and when she wants to know what took you so long, you can say that you were arguing for her. We got excellent cooks. The man grinned. That's the best offer I've had today. He dismounted and stepped closer to Connell and Lorcan. Name's Keevy, Captain Keevy, of Commander Halfkin's staff. Well, Captain, I'm Connell, and this is Lorcan, commanders in this army. Turning to a soldier close by, said, take Captain Keevy to this kitchen. Make sure he gets the royal treatment along with our best ale. Yes, my lord. Keevy stiffened. My lord? It's sort of a running joke, Lorcan hastened to say, giving the soldier an evil look and intoning. Most people only say it behind his back. He looked at Keevy. I tell you the tale when we come back to join you. Ah, Keevy nodded in understanding, assuming it was some foolish act done in the ignorance of youth. Allowing himself to be led away, he soon separated from his horse, only to discover that no one was cooking anything. All too quickly, he was tied and gagged. That was close, Connell muttered, casting another glance at the darkening sky. He was about to announce, spread the word, when he saw two enormous shapes filling the sky, followed by an alarm in the enemy camp. But the alarm was late, for billows of fire suddenly erupted from the dragons' mouths as they descended and swept across the enemy's encampment.
Dun, dun, dun. Gotta love how all the chapters end with the cliffhanger, right?
Yeah.
All right, that's it for this week. So be sure to keep your eyes peeled for next week's video. And thank you guys for listening.